Welcome to Radical Release, a healing series within There's No Way I Signed Up for This. This series was born in the in-between, the moments no one claps for, the silent breakdowns, the whispered prayers, the kind of healing that happens when no one's watching. This isn't about getting it all right. It's about learning to return to yourself with gentleness, with faith, and with enough grace to know that not having all the answers still means you're enough. Here, we talk about love after loss, peace after chaos, and how to hear God again, even when it's been quiet for a very long time. So take a breath. This is where we begin the radical release. Hey, welcome back to our next episode of the Radical Release series as a part of the There's No Way I Signed Up for This podcast. This episode, we're going to be looking at our focus again. Our last episode, our focus or our conversation was on what we're focusing on that's taking away from us, that's pulling our energy, that's preventing us to fully step into who we are meant to be. This episode, we're going to be looking at what is pouring back into us. How are we showing up for ourselves like we show up for others? We're shifting our focus from what drains us to what is restoring us. We want to explore how sacred discipline of receiving is imperative to our healing. We're wanting to walk in these spaces so we can be our best selves, but from a filled capacity. Understanding that it's not about pushing harder or doing more, or even fixing ourselves, right? It's about receiving. Letting yourself be poured into. Because if you're listening to this, chances are you're the one who's always showing up. You're the one who's praying for everyone else, who remembers everyone's birthdays. I'm just going to be honest here. I don't remember everyone's birthdays. Thank you, Facebook reminders. But for the most part, right? Remembering everybody's birthday, checking in on people who others forgot, and stretching yourself to meet the need even when your own cup is bone dry. And if you're being honest, you're tired, right? Not just in your body, but in your soul. So this episode, we're refocusing on what fills you. We're choosing what chooses us. Because your life is sacred and you can't keep running on spiritual fumes and calling it purpose. So the Bible verse that's the foundation for this episode is Philippians 4:8. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. And when we read that scripture, this is much more than positive thinking, but more like a spiritual checklist on what are the things we really need to focus on when we're looking for things to pour back into us. When you're in survival mode, you tend to fixate on things that went wrong, right? Who disappointed you? What you couldn't control? What's missing? What you should have done differently? All the shoulda, couldas, right? But we're in survival mode. And one thing about your ego, one thing about your mind is we want to protect ourselves, right? We don't want to make the same mistakes. So sometimes we start fixating on the things that we want to stay away from. And like the episode of last week, when you do that, you bring more of that in. So the truth of the matter is whatever you focus on is what you receive. You give it more power. If you focus your eyes on fear, you're going to get more of that. If you fix your thoughts on scarcity, you're going to create an internal poverty mindset. And if you focus on what hurts, you'll eventually stop believing healing is even possible. So that's why this episode is so important. Because again, last week we laid the foundation on things that we want to turn away from, where this week we're going to talk about what we want to look at and bring more into. When you refocus on what pours life back into you, such as joy, laughter, beauty, peace, prayer, silence, fill in the blank, you start reclaiming your internal rhythm back. So you're not just surviving anymore, you're thriving. But here's a funny, I guess I wouldn't say the word funny. It's interesting. When you have experienced the form of trauma, there's a level of guilt that's associated with receiving. Yeah, let's sit here for a second. Let's talk about that. For many of us, the hardest thing is not giving, right? We just talked about how you show up for other people, how you're checking in on other people, how when somebody calls and needs somebody to fill in, you're that person. The hardest thing is not the giving, it's the receiving. It's the receiving, right? Receiving love, receiving softness, receiving joy, receiving care without explaining why you deserve it. And the reason behind that is we don't feel that we do subconsciously. We've been taught to hustle for our worth. We've been taught that there's a level of awareness that comes with the suffering. We're normalizing burnout. And then we call it obedience. But guess what? That's not how that works. And it's Isaiah 58:11. It says, "The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in sun-scorched land. You will be like a well-watered garden." God never called you to be a dry well for everyone else to drink from. And yet, you are still showing up to that well empty. Why is that? Well, it could be because you were taught that to need something was to be weak. Stepping on some toes here, I'm sure. Stepping on my own. So when you have to ask for help, people have been taught that is a sign of weakness. When you need something, pride can get in the way of asking for help. But we have to understand that your need is not weakness. What if it's a sign of your design? And one of the things I spoke about a few minutes ago about how receiving love is a challenge. We're going to sit here for a second. Because one way the devil shows up is in relationships. Yes. On a major scale. And I'll talk more about that as we move forward through this series. But if you've been taught that you have to show up and provide and do and be somebody who gives or has the ability to give to receive love, if somebody is just doing it because of who you are without needing anything in return, we're suspect, right? We don't know what that's about. So we're looking side-eye at that person. Like, let's be honest. For those of us who have had trauma in our backgrounds, right? Or have had challenges around maintaining relationships. A lot of the times when you're showing up in relationships, it's around, who am I to this person? It's very transactional. But when you meet somebody who says, hey, I don't need you to do anything other than be you and allow me to love you, we're side-eyeing, right? We're like, we're waiting for the other shoe to drop because we've been taught that's not normal. But I think that's something we need to focus on normalizing. Receiving love without feeling we have to do anything other than just receive it. Because if we're in the space of not being able to receive love, receive softness, receive joy, receive care, right? Somebody just doing something nice for you without wanting anything in return. I know, I know. But it can happen. And we need to start normalizing that. Because once we're able to do that, it allows us to really lean in to learning how to receive, being comfortable with it, and understanding that we don't have to bleed out, for lack of a better word, for someone to love and take care of us. Again, and it's all goes back to when we've trusted somebody, we've been hurt. When we tried to love unconditionally, it backfired on us. Or when we needed care, the person that we trusted to provide that couldn't or wouldn't do it. So that's where we have to look at examples like one in the Bible with Jesus, fully divine, fully human, but rested. He received care. He let Mary pour oil on him. He let the disciples bring him food. He withdrew to lonely places, not just to be holy, but to be whole. So if Jesus is able to do this, and he's Jesus, isn't that something that you should be able to consider as well? And I've said multiple times, what actually pours back into you? What actually pours back into you? Let's talk about that for a minute, because it's a shift, right? It's easier to see or engage in what we can do for other people. It can be a challenge when we're allowing others to do for us. So when I'm saying what pours into you, I'm not saying what keeps you busy. Okay, let's sit there for a second. I'm not talking about your jobs, all your volunteer work, all the clubs you belong to, all the run, all the busy scheduling. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about what earned you applause, what certificate you've gotten, how many times you've been on the stage behind the podium saying thank you. I'm not even talking about what validates your usefulness. I'm asking you, what restores your soul? What does that look like? There doesn't even have to be fanfare around that. Because what restores your soul could be something as simple as sitting in stillness with a cup of tea, walking without your phone, creating something just because you like it, not because how much money it's going to bring in. Yeah, and pinch myself on that one because I need to anchor in on that one. Everything that you create doesn't have to be monetized. You could be just doing it to do it. So an example for me is my paintings. I have no desire to monetize any of my paintings. When I'm painting, I'm doing that strictly for joy. And if somebody wants one, I give it to them. Because I'm not doing it to monetize it. I have donated paintings to children advocacy centers. If you come to my home, my paintings are all around the house. If somebody sees a painting and they want it, I'll give it to them because I'm doing that for joy. That's something that pours back into me. Another example is calling a friend who listens without fixing. Now, a lot of us go into that fixer mode, right? When somebody calls, they have a problem, you're already trying to figure out what's the best option. What is the course of action to fix this? But sometimes people don't need you to do anything but listen. And what I've learned is I'll ask, am I listening just to listen, or am I listening to assist in fixing? I'll ask, because if I'm listening just to listen, I can turn that part of me off. They don't need me to fix anything. They just need me to listen. And that's another challenge too, because if you're listening to fix, then you're not listening to listen, because you're listening ahead of that person because you're trying to get a plan together. So as you're thinking of a plan, you might be missing parts of the conversation because you're not listening to hear, you're listening to fix. So that's just a word of advice that I've had to use. Like I'll say, look, am I listening to listen or am I listening to fix? But the flip side of that, do you have someone you can call who can do that for you? Ooh, you don't necessarily need them to come up with a plan. You just need somebody to hear you out. And then another way you can kind of provide yourself the space to get poured back into is saying no and not explaining why. I tell people all the time, like, no is a complete sentence. Now, is it a comfortable sentence? Not really. Because we haven't normalized that. If somebody asks you a question, you just say no. You feel like you have to give additional context. I'm saying no, and this is the reason why I'm saying no. But in actuality, you don't have to. Now, if just saying no is challenging or problematic for you, you don't have to say the actual word no, but you can say words that have the same outcome. So it could be something similar to, let me think about that and I'll get back to you. Or I have a lot going on right now. I'm not going to be able to give my full capacity to this request. Or something like, this sounds really good and I'm honored that you think I'm the person for this, but right now I'm being pulled in so many directions, I just don't have the ability to do that. So again, it's still saying no, just with more words. But can you say no and not explain? Yeah, but I'm not going to sit here and act like I've done that. Like if somebody asks me, I'm just going to no and just get off the phone, or no and walk away. I probably will give some additional context. The bottom line is you're taking time for yourself, right? You're taking time to pour back into you. Rest should not be passive. Rest is something that you need as a basic living experience. Like, to be alive on the planet, you need rest. And there's even documented cases, right? There's people who have disease or diagnoses where they can't sleep. And the science behind that is frightening. So rest is a requirement, right? And receiving isn't lazy. It's how you pour into yourself. So just circling back some, when we're talking about how to receive, and specifically receive love from other people, receive care from other people, I want you to really focus in on, why is it so easy for you to do for others, but not receive the same back towards you? Why does it feel okay to pour into others, to love on others, to take care of others, but when someone does those things back to you, you feel weird. You feel, I don't deserve this. And that's where I want you to sit. Why don't you feel you deserve it? Why does it not feel as easy to receive love, care, affection as it is for you to give it? Because that is where we're having some holes in the boat. Meaning, if there are areas within you that are open, people can pour all they want to. If you can't receive it and hold on to it, it's just going to filter through. So having an awareness of where those wounding areas are so you can fill it up is imperative in your healing process. So now here's some reflection practice. And I know I just asked some questions that I want you to sit with, but here's some additional ones I want you to reflect on. What are 3 things that truly pour back into you? And I know I gave you all some ideas, right? It doesn't have to be some huge thing. It could be every Sunday you choose not to take phone calls. You turn your phone ringer off, you put it on Do Not Disturb, right? It doesn't have to be huge elements. But I want you to think about what are 3 things that truly pour back into you, spiritually, emotionally, or physically. Then the next question is, how often do you intentionally make room for them? Because we can have a list, right? Like I said, painting. I love painting. I like hiking. I like chasing waterfalls, right? Those are all things that pour into me. I can do them with people. I can do it without. But the question is, how often do you intentionally make room for them? If you have a list of all these things, but you're not making time for them, then what is the point? And then the third question is, what is one draining habit or pattern you can say no to this week in exchange for that rest, in exchange for that restoration, right? So maybe you volunteer. This week, instead of volunteering, can you take that time to pour back into yourself? Or maybe you were thinking about taking someone's extra shift. Is that something that you might be able to adjust? Or maybe you have that one family member that every time they call, you know they want something. Or that one friend that every time they call, they start with, "You will not believe." Could you potentially not take that call, right? It can be something small. In actuality, starting out, it probably should be something small, so it's more doable. But this is not about that aesthetic self-care, right? Air quotes self-care. This is about self-preservation. And I love the term self-preservation over self-care because a lot of times people have gotten stuck in the phrase of self-care and they think bubble baths, they think pedicures and manicures, which for me, that's not self-care, that's a necessity for me. But anyway, I digress. They think going to drink wine or whatever, all these things are self-care. But here's the thing with self-care. Is it really self-care or is it self-numbing? Because if you're doing certain activities, disguising it as self-care, but you're really doing it to numb something that you're going through, that's not self-care at all. An example could be, on the weekends, I drink it. This is an example, not real life. On the weekends, I drink and drink and drink. That's my self-care. A whole box of wine, that's my self-care. But if you're doing that to numb, to forget, to disassociate, then it's not self-care because when you come back from all of that, the stuff that you're trying to numb out is still there. So it's not self-care, it's self-numbing. I like the phrase self-preservation because that's what we're doing. We're preserving ourselves. We're doing things to preserve who we are. So I know for me, I'm not a drinker, but I know for me, drinking is not preserving who I am. Now, I'm not telling anybody not to drink wine or whatever. I'm just using that as an example. And why I'm really kind of, I pull away when I hear people say self-care because I'm like, that phrase has just been overused. And I'm more focused on preserving who I am. And preserving who I am caring for myself, but it's so much more than just every 2 weeks I'm going to get my nails done. So here's the journal prompt for this episode. God, help me rescue the guilt of needing joy, rest, love, and softness. Teach me to see rest not as avoidance, but as alignment. And help me protect what pours into me so I can walk in wholeness and not just survival. And finally, a few affirmations, and this will also be listed in the podcast description, is I am allowed to rest. I am allowed to be restored. I am worthy of what pours into me. I choose a life-giving focus. I release what drains me, and I receive love in Jesus' name. So, hopefully this episode gave you some insight. It sparked up some conversational pieces, or at the minimum, it allowed you to sit down and really take an assessment of where you're showing up for other people, but not showing up for yourself. What you are so willing to give and provide and support to other people, but if somebody does that to you, you don't feel worthy enough to receive it. And start tracking where and how you're showing up for yourself when you're doing those self-preservation activities and doing things what pour back into you. And I'll throw on our Graceful Reset on the website, the Graceful Reset page, a tracker that not only helps you celebrate things that you should be happy about, write your tiny wins, but also let you track things that you're doing that pour back into you. So I hope that this episode has given you some ideas, has laid a foundation, and provided you the opportunity to think on what ways you can allow others to pour back into you, and you changing your focus onto that versus the things that you cannot control. Thank you all so much for your feedback that I've been receiving. I'm glad to hear that the additional journal prompts and things of that nature have been also helpful on your healing journey. And thank you so much for allowing me to participate with you. So until the next episode, you guys take care and stay safe.